Community Histories of South India. If you look at the program, you will find there are 2 sessions which address the issue of community histories of South India. This is the first one. I think the second one is tomorrow morning. Yeah, tomorrow morning. And the changes in this session, there was scheduled to be 4 papers, presentations, which have been slightly changed, and now we have 3 presentations, which I'll read out the titles and the order. Each presentation will be for 15 minutes, and I was informed that we will take the questions together. So if you have questions, comments, etc., please make note of them, because we'll take the questions together after all the 3 presentations. So 15 minutes for each presentation. Let me read out the presentations, the names first of all. The first presentation will be Dr. Munir Kutiani Muhammad from Al Jamia Al Islamia. Some of the names, the details are not given, so okay. The paper by Dr. Munir is entitled Early Muslim Settlement in Kyle Pattanam and its Socio-Religious Connection with Kerala, a Historical Inquiry. That will be the first presentation. The second will be by Yunus Ahmad, who is an independent researcher, and the second paper will be entitled Muslims of Coromandel, Positioning the Social History of the Tamil Muslims in Modern Tamil Nadu. And the third presentation will be by Said Shah Wais, independent researcher, entitled Sholapur from Past to Present. So after since we are also running late, I probably will take some 20 to 30 minutes to sort of set the theme to some parts. It's a vast topic, so some parts of the theme I probably will be raising. So my given theme is historical development of Mappila Muslim community in Kerala. And I'm thankful to Professor Siddiqui in the previous session, who has made my task a little easier, because he has sort of given an overview of the presence of Islam in India. Particularly, he was saying that the history of South and North, the Muslim presence in South and North, are different orders, in the sense that in South, Islam arrived through trade and not necessarily through conquest. Since this is supposed to be keynote for the theme being community histories of South India, what I will do is that, even though I am supposed to speak at length on the particular historical development of Mappila Muslim community in Kerala, which my sense is that a lot of history books, textbooks, even web resources give a succinct history of the community. So instead of repeating or reiterating the same kind of historical, what I will do is to pick some of the key moments which will sort of help us to have an overview of this particular Muslim community, Mappila community in Kerala. That will be the first part, maybe 10 minutes or so. And next 10 minutes or so, what I will do will be to look at the theoretical framing, or the way in which community as a category can be understood as a theoretical frame of engagement. So 2 parts, one will be more historical, which will be just regurgitating some information about some of the salient features of this community, and second will be to take on this question of community itself. Siddiqui also was saying that, talking about the early Muslims in South India, he named one of them as the Mappilas. So the Mappilas, the legend goes that one of the early kings, somewhere during the time of the Prophet, himself had a dream. This is of course a legend. Had a dream in which he dreamt of the moon splitting into many parts, something like that. He was puzzled by this dream, and he kept on asking people to interpret it for him. And some of the Arabic traders who has been trading with different parts of the world from BC onwards, the long history of trade, So some of the Arabic traders try to explain to him that some great event has happened in Mecca, and they explain to him what has happened there. And as a result, the inspired king, it seems, left his kingdom. He entrusts his kingdom to his chieftains, 6 or 7 of them, and he left for Mecca and then became a Muslim, converted to Islam, and did not bother to come back. Instead, he sent some envoys back to Malabar with instructions, and that is how the first mosque was established in Colonial. This, as I said, is a legend. Not much historical proof is of, but the mosque is there. Almost 780, established in 780, one of the oldest mosques probably in South Asia, is there in Colonial. Now, this will be the legendary part of the introduction of Islam at the time of Prophet himself to Malabar. Right? I will skip, cut a lot of history and go back to another event, which would be the writing of a book called Tuhfatul Mujahideen, which is written in 1583, written in Arabic, in Malabar itself, written in Arabic and immediately translated into various languages, Malayalam of course, as well as other languages. And it is said that this text became the theme of many sermons, many Friday sermons across Malabar as well as outside. Now, that, as the title says, I am not an Arabic scholar, so you probably will be able to interpret it, but I am given to understand that the meaning is a tribute to the warriors, right? So for the Mujahideen, so it's a tribute to the warriors. And this can be seen as one of the earliest anti-colonial, anti-imperial manifestos written in the Indian subcontinent, because it is actually a cry for outright, resistance. It actually uses a word which has become quite negatively interpreted later on, the jihad. It actually calls for a jihad, and it identifies Portuguese as a target of this jihad. And it actually enjoins various communities to join together in making the Portuguese leave, given the Portuguese violent history of Portuguese colonization, to chase the Portuguese away, right? Those who are interested, you can, of course, there are a lot of internet resources as well as various other books which sort of deal with it, including my own humble effort. So probably you can read upon that if you're interested in this. The book is by Sheikh Ahmed Zainuddin Makhdoom II, the second. His father is also Sheikh Zainuddin, so he's known as the second. He was born, there's a little debate about when he was born, 1498 or 1531. But he's supposed to have died in the year he wrote this particular book, Tuhfatul Mujahideen, in 1583. But again, he is not in a strict sense a Mappila, or he is not even in the contemporary sense an Indian, because his family hails, as Professor Siddiqui was also explaining, his family hails from Yemen. He was born in Mahi in Kerala, but his family hails from outside the Indian subcontinent, from Yemen. And this, the next part of the histories which I am going to show, will be a recurring theme, that they are not. And one of the pings or one of the prongs of my presentation would be to say that, how do I put it in a brief possible way, as that we are not just citizens of a nation, that we are also citizens of the world. To put it quickly, I am actually making a cosmopolitan argument, that we don't only belong to a particular nation, we belong to the world. Everybody does. The world belongs to us and we belong to the world, not just to any particular locality or any particular nation as such, as it were. The second, first was a legend, second was Zainuddin Makhdoom, and the third will be a curious history of the Makhdoom Thangals in Tirunelveli in Malabar, in Kerala. The first Tangal is a epithet to describe a saint, somebody who is a holy man, right? So the first Tangal, who again hails from South Yemen, he belongs to the Hyderabad lineage. He comes from Hyderabad, the South Yemen family, and they had a quarrel with the local king there, and they left Yemen. And he, when he was 19 years old, he was born outside. When he was 19 years old, settled in, reached by ship, settled in Tirunelveli, right, in Mampuram, the place actually called Mampuram. Now the thing is that he was born outside Kerala, outside India, and settled and died in India. Now, by all accounts, he was a very holy man, a man of letters, a man of the world. And he wrote in different languages, even Malayalam, or the old Malayalam, and the Arabic Malayalam, or even in Arabic, etc. He was seen as a spiritual person, venerated by everybody, feared by the British. His time is 1750 to 1844. 1750 to 1844. So by the time of British presence was increasing in Malabar, he was a very old man, a very old, frail man. But the British was afraid of him. They were afraid of this man because he stood against all kind of injustices, whether it is by the colonial government or by local landlords. So he was strongly against casteism. So all kind of things that he was done there. He was actually venerated, respected, and loved, more than feared, loved by the people of Malabar. Right? Now, in 1844, when he died, his son, who was around at that time 25 something years old, became the second Tangal. So the first Tangal was born outside, reached Kerala, India around 19 years old, and he died at the age of, quite an old age, forgotten, didn't calculate the years. The second Tangal, who was known as Mampuram Tangal II, or Mampuram Said Fazal Tangal, or lovingly, endearingly known as Pukoy Tangal. And he was a young chap, very in his father's footsteps, very spiritual, but also very revolutionary, very radical. He continued the anti-British efforts of his father, anti-caste, anti-British efforts of his father, and he was as much feared by the British, especially young youth, that they secretly wanted to exile him, and this actually happened. They wanted to politically exile him, but they realized that if they exile him, it will create to a large, a rebellion in the ranks in Malabar itself. So they advised him that it is in his own interest, more than his own interest, in his interest only because if he continues his practices, a lot of Mappilas are going to get killed. So to save the local people, they advised him that he should voluntarily exile himself. And being a nice person that he was, he took the advice. At the age of 28 years, he exiled himself. And the story goes that from Tirunelveli, his bullock cart traveled all the way to Calicut Sea, something like 30-40 kilometers, and the whole village accompanied him to see him off. He was that, the darling of the village, as it were. Later on, he made many attempts to come back, but the British, of course, denied him. And later on, the story was also came out that people thought that he went by himself to visit Mecca, etc., on a pilgrimage. Later on, the story was revealed that it was a British collector who played a game whereby fooled him to exile himself, right? And as a result, H.V. Connolly was murdered by Mappilas in, if I remember, 1852, 53, something like around that time, right? So probably one of the first murders of a British official. So this will be the story of the third part, where we have a person who was born outside Kerala, outside India, dying in Kerala, and his son, born in India, in Kerala, dying outside. He died outside. I heard he went to Mecca, Jerusalem, etc., etc., and he is laid to rest in Turkey. in Turkey. And it seems, it's said, I not visited the grave, but it seems on the tomb it is marked that here lies Al-Malabari. Al-Malabari. He was known as from Malabar. So if you look at the history of Mappilas in Kerala, you will see that it is a different kind of geography that this community inhabits. They live in a different world. In the sense that probably Saudi Arabia may be nearer to Malabar than even Maharashtra or Tamil Nadu. Instead of nearness, the sea routes were so nearer than the land routes. Now we look at the map as a land map. But the sea routes were a different history, it was a different history. And the easiest way to understand is that actually Saudi Arabia was nearer to Malabar than probably even Tamil Nadu. Or even probably Trivandrum, which is in Kerala itself. So these people occupy a different history. Of course, there is a parallel history in North India as well, whether it is of Sayyid Ahmad Khan, etc., etc. There is a different kind of history of a, shall I say, a post-national way of belonging, a post-national belongingness which these Muslim communities exhibit. Now, I think I'm exceeding my time, so I'll just quickly sum up the maybe two names which I'll sort of bring up. One will be in 1904 to 1813, a person known as, 1847 to 1912, a person known as Makti Thangal. Makti Thangal is a famous figure in Kerala in that he wrote in Malayalam exhorting people for education, all kind of things he has done, a very progressive person. Lack of time I'm skipping, and then I will end with one of the later figures known as M.K. Haji. M.K. Haji was born in Tirunangadi, very near Mamburam Thangal himself, and was part of the Khilafat movement, anti-British nationalist movement, and nationalism, Khilafat, and he again has to run away because he was suspected by British of anti-colonial activities, and he ran away to Chennai and became quite rich by doing certain businesses, etc. And he came back and he started an orphanage, a hospital, a school, and later on a college. All these are still running. Tirunangadi has all these. An orphanage started by him, a hospital, a school, and also a college, PSMO college in Tirunangadi. So just to say that the contribution of various Mappila community leaders to the community and to the state or to the nation itself has been immense. And it is about time that we need probably to look back to these communities and community histories, regional leaders, regional figures, regional communities, in a way to sort of push the argument of the community a little more forward, which will be what quickly I will maybe take 10 minutes. It's actually part of a longer paper, but since we are short of time, I will only listen to the last part, which actually takes on this notion or tries to understand the significance of community as a category. What is community? Why is community important? Is community important? If so, why? Right? Yeah, this is the paper actually has a discussion about modernity, about notions of colonial modernity, of citizen as of subject, etc., etc. To come to the point where we start asking this question that why is community significant? Now, what is community? What is a community but a community of beings? A community of beings. Sacred is not necessarily something which is metaphysical. Rather, it belongs to the plane of life itself. We could postulate that it is a recognition of the sacredness of life and in life that constitutes community. Community then would be the result of the recognition of another being as a being, whether of the same kind or not. Such a recognition, often instinctual, also entails a communication to oneself and to other and constitutes a community. Let me repeat. It is a recognition or recognition of another creature as similar or dissimilar, that probably in that is that how one recognizes oneself as such. We realize only we are what we are when we realize another. So it is probably the crux of the maxim which states that it is the other that constructs the self. So community is born in this recognition of the other as the self-same. I'm skipping some parts. I'm skipping a lot of parts. In a nutshell, we may agree that it is only in the recognition of the other that a community is possible. Then community, instead of becoming something that we have to disown, becomes something that we have to own in order to determine life itself. For it is the recognition of life itself. Community then becomes the recognition of life itself. Of course, some discussion about a lot of thinkers who have actually worked on community, some of them being, I just give the names if those are interested to follow up. Jean-Luc Nancy, Maurice Blanchot, Roberto Esposito, George Bataille, etc. etc. People who have actually focused on this notion of community, though from a European vantage point. So, one of these writers, Esposito, examines the etymology of community. Where did the word community come from? Of course, in the European languages, and notes that it resonates with notions of two things which make up this word called community. You can think of commune, communism, community. All these words come from a similar roots, and these roots which make up community comes from something which can be called commonness. Com means common, something is common, and the mooness will be something called gift. So two parts of this etymologically means common, gift. Commonness and gift. A gift which is not a gift which you render, which you give in return, expecting a return gift. No, it is a gift in itself. It's a free gift without an expectation of anything in return. You can think of life itself as a gift, right? Life itself as a gift, and how do you return this gift? So the earlier statement I made, sacred need not be something metaphysical. Sacred is, life itself is sacred. In a sense, community is a recognition of the gift of life and also the inevitability of death, and in others and thereby in oneself. Would death ever be an apt return for the initial gift of life? What does it even mean to say return? Return to whom? Return how? One, of course, is reminded of Nietzsche has his famous phrase called eternal return of the self-same. Eternal return of the self-same. So this becomes a crucial way, tool in order to sort of understand community. Community that's common and gift. But what is inherent in such a recognition of the other and also of the self is already a communication. So commonness is also a communication. Communication of being alive, of life itself as a communication. The notion of communication underwrites the notion of community. That is, community comes in through communication of a commonness and sharedness that is probably more in tune with the ecology and economics of our own desires. So, in this formulation, in such a formulation, community instead of being a problem of modernity is actually the solution for modernity. This will be the take. Community has always become a problem. Something remains even after we become modern. The community still remains. What to do with this community? So instead of thinking it as a problem, something which remains, it's actually the future of our future. Community in a way becomes a solution for modernity. To put it differently, community instead of being a curse is probably the cure for capitalism. Community is present everywhere, wherever humans are concerned and connect with each other, across even geopolitical borders and boundaries. Of course, I elaborate the notion of community in a different sense that when Marx called for one of the most radical statements, workers of the world unite. Right? He did not say workers of Germany or Europe unite. He said workers of the world. Workers belong to the world. So he is evoking a world community, not a national community. Right? Similarly, if you look at various feminisms, they also are evoking a sense of a woman community. If you look at Dalits, caste, etc., you also see a sense of a community. If you look at one of the most radical, vanguard of most radical movements are students. So who are you? You belong to a student community. The point being that what connects all these different radical positions is the sense of is community. Communities, they all had community, but there were different communities at different historical junctures. And probably a time has come when community per se, by itself, is now, as Jean-Luc Nancy calls, community is resistance itself. Community is resistance. Or to say community as resistance. Hence, it is not far-fetched to imagine community as a constant in the catalyst for human endeavour for liberty and equality. I'm again skipping some parts. So, to say that community is not necessarily in our past, but belongs to our future, and the coming community probably may be the only permanent feature of the human community. With those remarks about the theoretical underpinnings of the notion of community, I stop, and unfortunately there is not time for any questions or clarifications at this stage. Probably you can reserve your questions for the last part of this session.